Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar today on the fight between AI and software engineers. My name is Sonia. I'm the Events and Community Manager at Legals. And here today, we have Michael McCormick from Oyster and Maulik, CEO of CodeMonk. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Michael, do you want to get started?
Hi, yeah, I'm Michael McCormick, and I am the SVP for Product and Engineering at Oyster. And Oyster is a platform for global employment. That means we use our wealth of knowledge and our global infrastructure to help anyone, anywhere, hire, pay, and care for people in over 180 countries. And my role here is to enable my teams to figure out what we need to build, how we need to build it, and then bridge that into the overall company strategy and operations. And I started in technology sort of from the side. Everything I did before I was in technology, I used it. So things like financial planning, graphic design, and music. So the common thread in everything was technology, and I realized I needed to be an engineer at that point. So I taught myself to program, made demos, jumped into the first dot-com wave, sold a startup to BEA, and then have held various management and engineering positions, both at BEA, Oracle, and then eventually at Salesforce, where I was a CTO and a VP of engineering for their ESG products.
Amazing, thank you. And Maulik?
Hey, thanks, Sonia. Good to meet you, Michael. It's Maulik here. I'm the founder and CEO of CodeMonk.ai, and our platform is for companies to build their best engineering teams by first analyzing or finding the gaps in their existing tech team, and then going out to the market and sourcing the best candidates. And we're trying to automate the entire process end to end. I have been in tech for nearly about 20 years now. I have worked in a lot of product-led, tech-led roles, building a B2C, B2B product, across different domains, including fintech, e-commerce, prop tech, payments, and also gambling for a change. And whatever I did, it was always based on creating new technologies and new products. And I found quite frustrating that you, as a product lead or a tech lead, you don't always have the best team that you want to deliver your product. And this is where I was frustrated. And that led me to build CodeMonk to try and solve that particular problem.
Amazing. Thank you, Maulik. Perfect. Shall we get started with our conversation? My first question is, what is the current state of AI in relation to software development? Michael, do you want to get started?
Sure. That is a good question. It's the million-dollar question, and the answer changes every day. AI is, though, already in use in most engineering organizations in one way or another, but there are definitely significant limitations and concerns. Looking at things like GitHub Copilot, which is really the perfect example. It can look at your code, it can provide contextual suggestions right there in the editor, auto completion, structural things, classes, functions, and it can do this across multiple languages. And when you look at Copilot Labs, which is the research and development cutting edge pieces, you can get a glimpse of what's coming next. Things like generating tests, explaining what a block of code does, translating one programming language to another. But there are definitely concerns that are holding people back from jumping in with both feet. Things around intellectual property. When you use code generated by an AI, you might be using code someone else wrote and AI shuttled to you without attributing it. Or when you write code, you might find that code in someone else's repository one day. So there's definitely also a concern that developers could become dependent on AI, limiting their exposure to other aspects of programming not available from interacting with an AI, and limiting their long-term growth as a result. So we're definitely still in experimental mode and trying things out across the industry.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think AI has been coming for a long time, but what really exploded is the launch of ChatGPT version 3 to open public. And I think there was this YouTube video of someone generating code using that. And his reaction was amazing. He was completely surprised and gobsmacked by the automated code generation, but also the quality of it. And that really kicked off this whole race. I wouldn't say a lot of tools right now were created because of that. Some of those the current tools have been in the making for a while, but that certainly accelerated the race for AI and the adoption of the AI into the mainstream. GitHub Copilot, which Michael mentioned, is probably one that is leading the race right now within the software development. But I think there's plenty of other tools. That is called Tab 9, which can also do code completions based on the syntax or the structure you provide. There's another one called Cogram, which again works to improve the code quality written by the manual developer, and so many. So in my opinion, I think there is a lot of development happening in this space. And most of that development currently, in my opinion, is focused on replacing all the manual and the mundane tasks that a software developer may be doing in their day-to-day activity. And probably, the non-productive part of it, which is probably a better use case to be replaced by an AI.
Thank you, Maulik. Could you both share how your organizations are leveraging AI in general for software development today?
Yeah, so Oyster is really the most technology forward company in the employer record space when it comes to AI. We have a really unique offering in that we're solving how to hire people across multiple geographies around the world, and there are different laws everywhere. Everyone has a different situation. Basically, everything is an edge case, and we also deliver our service with a combination of people, HR representatives that know the local rules and represent for the employer there. And then we also have software that makes sure that the knowledge that people need is in their hands at the right points. And that software also runs the system itself. So really providing these kinds of HR functions globally at scale requires that combination of software and people. And because we weren't funded the same way that some of our competitors were, we really had to lean into the technology enablement side of things. So being able to gather and code, govern, version, and use our knowledge to run software allows people and allows our system, as knowledge changes, to have the software automatically update with having to throw engineers at people at the problems. So we're leveraging AI and creating software experiences that put people in touch with the right person at the right time with the right advice all the time, instead of a whole bunch of people who may or may not have the right information or might take a long time to get that information to you. So really providing that best-in-class customer experience at software scale is what we're focusing on.
Yeah. As our name suggests, CodeMonk.ai, we are AI-based platform right from the beginning. In the simplest sense, we are trying to build a recommendation system between a job spec and a talent skill set and motivations, which some may argue has been done for a while now. LinkedIn probably is a good example. But we believe all the systems out there are fairly outdated, and they purely do like a keyword matching and nothing more than that. Whereas we are taking a very different approach, where we really try to understand where are the gaps in your team, not only technical gaps, but the behavior gaps, the cultural gap, the motivation gaps, the ways of working, and a lot of other things, and also try to understand how a particular talent go about finding a new job. What are the reasoning behind that, the motivations, financial rewards, their skill set, their willingness to learn new things, the kind of team or the cultural environment they want to work in. And based on that, we're trying to create a system where, without really going into job spec and posting on LinkedIn or wherever else, the employers can have the right talent in front of them. And similarly, without having to go through a lot of applications and job hunting, the talent can have the right job in front of them So we are kind of completely trying to eliminate the entire recruitment process with what we are trying to do. So I think we have been working on it for a while. The biggest problem that I think any AI company will have is the data. That how do you really get the data to train your models, to make those, decisions that AI can replicate instead of humans. So I think when we started, we actually focused more on the data model that we wanted to have, and we built our platform to actually generate that data first and then train the models on top of that. So that's where we are right now.
Amazing, thank you. And what are some specific tasks or areas in software development where AI is currently making a significant impact or assisting engineers?
So that's a good question. And again, it varies in a lot of places, but the way I try to think about it and the way that it feels to me is that AI is basically you're pair programming with a robot. So the robot's good at retrieving information, suggesting what to do with it based on its ability to instantly access the whole library of what's been done before. So this can make engineers very, very much faster at some parts of what they do. It also helps junior engineers learn algorithms and basic skills much more quickly through repeated examples. What used to be, spending time going to Stack Overflow and doing keyword searches and trying to figure out what things might help you get a leg up. Now you have this robot kind of doing that part for you. And you can even see the usage of Stack Overflow has gone down in the past year or so significantly as a result of this. And having the robot do that kind of work for you frees you up to spend more time on the creative tasks of software development, which includes vetting the suggestions the robot makes and recombining your ideas with the robots and generally just becoming inspired by the unexpected things that your robot might even tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I take a slightly different approach, not completely different approach. So I generally split the whole software development, the activities the developers or engineers do into two parts, like a thinking part, you're analyzing what needs to be done, and then the doing part that, hey, I now need to write the piece of code. In my opinion, I think AI currently, or pretty much all the current tools that I am aware of, is more on the doing part. All the AI that is coming out right now enables the developers to execute things better and faster, as Michael said. And I think this is where I will see a lot of disruption happening as well. That AI will just have like code completion. We already are seeing quality reviews. There are tools doing that where they can automatically review the pull request and rest of the things. Finding bugs, running a lot of test cases, emulating a lot of devices, and all this is all known stuff. And I think they are just getting better and better. So what that leaves the engineer to do more is on the thinking part, where as Michael said, they need to make that creative decision based on what the AI is doing. So I think that's where the split is.
Yeah, definitely. And do you both think that AI can truly replicate or enhance the creativity and problem-solving skills that a human software engineer brings to the table?
Yeah, it's the big $1 million question for the long term and the existential threat behind why the title of this might be The Fight Between Them. Definitely, I don't see it replicating, but I do see it enhancing creativity and problem-solving skills. I mean, humans and AIs, we're both pattern matching machines, but we do it in much different ways. And without getting too deeply into theories of neuroscience, the organic nature of domain crosstalk in a human brain is just fundamentally different from how an ML model's parameters are designed and glued together to bias certain types of outcomes. So this difference means that AIs can be very surprising to us. They can say things that we never would have said or thought of. And oftentimes, as we see, they're hallucinatory and they're wrong, but sometimes they're hallucinatory and they're compelling. And they're worth wondering about. So if we're really good at vetting these surprises for their usefulness and their accuracy, then we can leverage those as inputs for our own creativity.
Yeah. Yeah. As Michael said, AI is all about patterns, finding patterns, and finding variations in those patterns and trying to understand what does it mean from the desired outcomes perspective, by analyzing the pattern and the solution, and just going over and over, to understand, in mathematical terms, the probability score of a given outcome. And AI just tries to maximize the probability so that you always have the outcome that you're looking for. So in theory, uh, for any task at hand, if you can identify a pattern behind that task and you expect to produce certain outcomes given that input pattern, then I think AI will basically just become better and better, and maybe even more capable than the humans at repeating those patterns and tasks. So in a very simple example, let's say, autocorrection and Grammarly and those kind of tools, which pretty much everyone is aware of. It follows a very simple, structured input. It try to predict, okay, what is the next logical sequence of words that or the phrases which would be coming back, and it just gives you suggestions. If you take the suggestion, then it reinforces the learning, and if you reject the suggestion, then it's kind of course correct the outcomes or the probability model behind that. And as you see, nowadays, these autocorrections or document generators are pretty good in what they do, and in many cases better than what humans can write or produce, without all the typos and mistakes and all. So I think we are already seeing a few use cases where AI is certainly doing a better job. But then when it comes to the creative side of the things, then I think it's probably may struggle to catch up with the humans. Because in my opinion, a creative outcome is something when you break those patterns and come up with completely new and unexpected outcome, which people did not expect. And that is where the creativity comes in. So by definition, if AI does not have those patterns to create that new output, then it will not be able to create it. So I think this is where I kind of make assumptions that any outcome which is not based on the known patterns, AI will not be able to generate that, in my opinion. Again, a lot of opinions here.
Exactly. And if it's used right, how much do you think use of AI can increase the efficiency and output of the engineers?
I think it really remains to be seen. So really so much of this depends on not only the engineer, but the systems and processes that the teams use to vet the code before it gets fully adopted. So in areas like test automation and code suggestions, it's like a natural language search versus that Stack Overflow keyword search, which means you get the good with the bad. You get a summary without the context. And you might have an engineer who may or may not have the wisdom to create a backstop against taking on bad ideas. And so you also end up with I do think that there's a curve in terms of the usefulness of all of the data that the AI, a generative AI specifically, is using to create its suggestions. And we can end up in a situation where that database, that data store, all of those inputs are limited. There, just by definition, is a limit to what's there. And if the only input that goes back into it is code that was written based on stuff that came out of it, you'll start to see a flattening of the usefulness of it, and you'll start to see sort of a homogenization of the kind of work that's being done. And so we may call that increased efficiency and increased output. But when you really want to see, what you really want to see is increased productivity, meaning that efficiency and output are going up. And that is going to require stepping outside of those models, doing unusual things, coming up with things the models wouldn't be able to come up with, and then refreshing that data set with those new ideas. So we'll always need that in there. and we're going to need it more and more over time if we're not doing it from the beginning.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I kind of agree with what Michael said. But I think right now the tools that we are seeing right now, they are enhancing, but not to a great extent, the productivity gains of the engineering team. But certainly, I think they definitely have the potential in short run to start adding big value to your tech teams. And as Michael said, right, creativity is where it will make a big difference. If AI can be powerful, it can be very good, but if you are just using it without really understanding what it's doing, you are just going to produce a lot of garbage and a lot of junk. So instead, where the productivity gains will happen is when really solid, good engineering team are able to drive the outcomes or the output from the AI to a better and more productive systems, a more creative solution to known problems. I think that's where really you will start seeing some productivity gains. Otherwise, you are just, producing a lot of junk, over and over.
Thank you, Maulik. I'm surprised to see the chat very quiet. So everyone, please feel free to ask any questions, any doubts you have for Michael and Maulik, and we'll get to the questions at the end. But yeah, given the rise of AI, what advice do you have for current software engineers in terms of skill development and to stay relevant in this field?
That's a great question. And I definitely think that I don't even separate AI from software engineering at this point. It's a fundamental tool. It's like saying, if you want to be an author, what do you recommend? Well, I recommend you learn how to use a word processor. It's the same thing. So the recent growth and the power of generative AI means we now have a new resource for ideas and information. So the ability to turn those ideas into useful ideas and to know which ones can get there and to turn information into actual knowledge, it's a constant negotiation between people and machines. So to stay relevant, developers have to learn how an AI thinks. So I would recommend you deep dive into machine learning, become an expert at the mechanics behind it, and always reach outside of the AI generated suggestions and information. It's limited, like I said before, by its knowledge of all the code that's been used to train it, but you're not. So to be good at really accepting, rejecting, or synthesizing the AI information and turn that into real knowledge, you have to have real world wisdom outside of the AI training set.
Yeah. I think if you look at like any big data sample, is more or less follow a normal curve. So inherently, if you collectively look at all the software engineers, then majority of the software engineers tend to be more of just an executor. They just develop the code without really thinking through. You normally have your tech lead and the software architects and all senior guys doing all the thinking part and the designing part and all. And most of the mid and junior guys, they just tend to execute more. I think those latter part is someone that they really need to rethink about their skilling, because all the execution. I think we have said it a few times now that there are already tools coming up and making it a lot more faster and efficient. And where the gap will be really on the creative side, the thinking side, the problem solving side, and this is what really they need to develop. You really need to understand what is the use case of using AI in a particular part of system development, and then be able to use the tool to produce the desired outcome. I think this is where the skill set will be required. Otherwise, I think AI will just replace the executors.
Thank you, Maulik. Let's talk about the future now. What are your predictions for the next 5 to 10 years in terms of the relationship between AI and software engineering? How do you think it will evolve?
This is a really hard one because of the unique exponential nature of the growth and the power of AI. And so don't come to me in 10 years and play this back to me, because I'm sure it's going to be wrong. But I think as AI becomes better and better at doing what it does, we might fear that the involvement of the human will be less and less necessary. I agree with what Maulik just said. My opinion today is that software developers have to think of an AI as just another programming language. It's less precise and it's more natural. But just like human to human communication, there's always going to be a need and an opportunity that comes of that lack of precision. There's a need to follow up, monitor, confirm that what you meant to say is what was heard. And then there's an opportunity to be inspired by the way your intention was creatively misunderstood into something wonderful you might not have thought of yourself. So just like emotional intelligence or EQ, that's a key skill for communicating and collaborating according to the emotional landscape of a human being. I think of AI intelligence, or what I don't know if I've coined this or not, but AIQ is likely going to be a key skill for the next decade's software developer.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I think to predict the future, if we look back into the history of software engineering, then it started as a low level assembly level programming. You were programming the chip directly using binary codes, and that eventually started evolving to be more human understandable, moving to Pascal and C and COBOL kind of programming languages, which then evolved to become more of object-oriented and multi-threaded applications. Then came the whole wave of drag and drop editors, low-code tools, no-code tools, which is what we are currently seeing. So I think it's just evolving on that natural path where it was in the beginning was completely only meant to be understood by machines and not by humans, to become to a level where currently you can program a system without even knowing anything about programming. And as Michael said, it's becoming more human-like. So I think it's just continuing on that natural path where it's becoming a lot more intelligent, a lot more faster, and a lot more easy for any normal people or people without engineering background to understand it and run their own programs. I think that's where it's heading.
Thank you both. My final question is, what advice would you give to employers looking to build their software engineering teams?
I had the really good fortune to be able to work and deep dive into the work of Peter Schwartz when I was at Salesforce and the scenario planning. And one of the things that I learned about scenario planning, and the big key takeaway there, is that you never invest in a single thing as much as you want to invest in flexibility. And so you want to be able, as that single thing that's the most important thing changes and evolves over time, you want to be able to stay with it. And so this is all about iterating and learning. So don't overinvest in the hype of the moment, invest instead in that flexibility. And what that is, in my mind, is focusing on the skills that help engineers learn to use AI productively. And those are really machine learning skills. Machine learning focuses on making decisions, asking the right questions of data, figuring out the best way to get to the answers. That means applying business and domain knowledge to ask good questions, choosing appropriate models, or building an entirely new one to answer them. So programmers, not machine learning engineers, but programmers who've learned how to think about the business problem they're solving and who deeply understand data structures and transformation will have exercised important transferable skills into that machine learning domain. And programmers who've built the wisdom of how to learn through iteration and optimize which ways they iterate will also quickly see parallels in building and testing machine learning models and therefore the AI outputs. So a deep knowledge of statistics, matrix math, calculus, it's not required for most programmers, but if you possess it, it will be priceless in speaking both languages.
Yeah. My advice is slightly more short term than long term to prospective employers, because given the work we are doing at CodeMonk, and I'm going to be a little bit shameless here, that most of the employers don't really know what they're hiring for and what kind of teams they want to build. Even if you look at all the job specs on LinkedIn, they're just, hey, this is your role, this is your responsibilities, but don't really tell, okay, what what are the skill set, what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve, when you're recruiting someone. So I think they need to move off that traditional resourcing model or sourcing models, and instead they need to go more about finding individuals who really are not only skilled but also motivated to deliver the outcomes you are looking for, right? I've done many interviews myself, me looking for a job, but also recruiting a lot of people. And most of the time, the interviews and everything is structured around, okay, what have you done in past? That's completely irrelevant to what you want me to do as a candidate, right? I may not have worked on a similar system in past, but I may have a really good skills and attitude to actually come in and make a big difference, right? So I might be a better candidate than as compared to someone who may have worked on a similar system, but just literally doesn't have any motivation to come and work for you. So I think those kind of changes in how you're sourcing people, what you're sourcing them for, is required. And I think flexibility, build a flex teams, let your teams scale up and down as per your requirement, ability for people to move around from one project to another. All the dynamic components of your team is where they need to invest. And if you bring on board people who are naturally inclined to learn new things, they are problem solvers, they are eager to learn new things, I think they'll add a lot more value as new tools come out, as new problems and challenges come up. And they will also be not afraid to pick up new frameworks, new languages, and so on. So I think that's what my advice will be.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you so much for your time. Just for everyone to know, the questions that I asked today were actually suggested by an AI, but we just had a bit of human touch to make them more interesting and relevant to today's conversation. So yeah, these were all my questions, but let's look at the chat. I've seen some questions asked. There's one from Jeff. What are your thoughts about using generative AI using NLP prompts to then capture low-code functionality packets to quickly build features and functions or complete apps?
I really like this question. I've been thinking about this kind of thing a lot, just as you see going from assembly to C to C++, getting to Java, getting to libraries, looking at how Node is always pulling libraries in, just how we keep building, creating Lego blocks and building on top of them. And each of these things is designed to encapsulate some kind of functionality, so we don't have to keep reinventing it. And you can even see in the skills of software developers over time, you have different aspects of the job that involve either software engineering, where it's something new, and then there's software assembly, which is the ability to put these blocks together and understand how to do it. And low-code platforms are a perfect example of the next evolution at that point, where you're creating a way to interact with, you're creating a way to make a program without having to actually write precise, specific code. It's prepackaged for you, and you're just tying things together in a more intuitive way. So you end up with a power user instead of a software engineer being able to build something that turns into an application. So the idea then of just going the next step, which is saying, how can we have natural language interaction with a low-code platform to do the things the low-code platform does? It's absolutely just the next evolution of this. You end up with the benefits of it, which is if it's something normal, something simple, something you need to do quickly, something you're applying to a specific domain, but there's nothing like particularly innovative required about it besides just applying it to your domain, perfect. What you miss is the same kind of thing on the other side, which is if you need something very unique, some sort of defensible IP, something that is not just the assembly of blocks, but the assembly in a new way, or the creation of new things at the very core. you're not going to be able to get that here. So you get the benefits and you have the cost. So depending on your use case, it's a great thing. And I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of the current research and development there.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think what you're suggesting there, Jeff, is comparing to like a drag and drop solution. You're saying that, hey, instead of drag and drop, maybe we can just tell, hey, AI, go and build this thing for me, and it can generate for you, which I think is a great thing, because then you're just producing the output that you're looking for. But then, like any low-code solution, or a majority of the low-code solution is fairly standardized. It's normally the common denominator, which is what you are trying to push up and up. And so for the same command, you will always have the same output. So if let's say the app or the functionality you're building is fairly standardized, then I think it's great to be able to do that. But if they are very unique, very different, bespoke, then I think it might be a little bit tricky. So it's really where that layer of abstraction is, how much you want to standardize and what layer you want to standardize on.
Thank you both. We have another question from Jonas. Would you trust AI to remove peer review from the development process?
I have a quick answer. Yes.
Go for it.
Yes. I would. Let's say peer review, I think it's an interesting concept. So someone writing code, someone else is reviewing it. But who is better? The person reviewing may not be really good, so even the review is not done in an optimal manner. And how do you really make sure that it is actually done in an optimal manner? You're only just relying on a person, and your trust in that person that he will do it right, but you don't really know in many cases, right? So if a solution comes out over here, which can better the human, decision making or analysis here, then yes, I would totally trust AI to do it.
I'll create a point of contention here, perhaps. I totally agree that you never know if the peer knows any better than an AI in terms of how to review. But the saying that I go back to is, what's better than a human and an AI? It's two humans and an AI. So why not have all of them happening? And on top of that, I think that when you're building collaborative engineering teams, having your engineers that you work with on your team know what you're doing is really important. So there are just some practical reasons why you still wouldn't want to remove the peer review. But having two people and an AI, one person reviewing, one person coding, and the AI reviewing and potentially coding too, you get the best of both worlds at that point.
Can I have a twist on that?
Yes.
How about an AI producing a code and another piece of AI reviewing that?
It's like when they have Bard generating something and then a question and then handing that to ChatGPT and giving that back to Bard, seeing how those conversations develop. Why not?
Yeah, sorry, this makes sense.
Thank you. Another question that we have, in the user case of hiring a developer for a project, would AI drive the price and length of the project work down? If yes, how to negotiate that?
This is 100% Maulik's to answer. It's his
Interesting.
domain.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's an interesting one. I think it has potential to bring down the time to develop software and all. I'm not sure of the cost. I think it might be the other way around. The cost might actually go up because none of these AI tools are going to come cheap, right? Plus, a lot of efforts will move away from executing to more of analysis and problem solving. And those people with those skill sets tend to be fairly expensive. More fairly experienced, more domain expertise and other things. So I think it's not as straightforward as it would bring down the cost. It will probably in some cases, but it may push up cost in other parts of the project delivery.
Thank you, Maulik. We have another question from Jeff. He says, I read recently that the CEO of Tata, huge India-based IT outsourcing consultancy, that they're going to rethink their approach to software engineering, and AI's impact could ultimately reduce the need for human programmers, like within 5 years max. So he's suggesting that they need to rethink the role of the software developer, like more architectural oversight, meta-integrations, etc. What are your thoughts as to when AI begins to replace human developers?
The
I can,
question of, go
sorry,
ahead,
sorry,
Maulik.
Michael. I was just going to say,
Um,
I can maybe take like a quick stab on it.
yeah,
Uh, I think we kind of we iterated here in the talk earlier that uh, there are again two kind of software. I know TCS. I'm from India originally, so I know TCS quite well, and we recruit a lot of people from TCS, Infosys, and all those big tech consultancies. And when we interview, I think again my analysis is that most of the people fall into two baskets. Maybe there are more baskets, but for me, they fall into two baskets. Like, doers, they just literally do, okay, build me a pink elephant, and they'll build a pink elephant without thinking. Those people definitely have to worry. AI, in my opinion, will definitely take away their jobs. Because AI will just be much better in executing tasks and things. But what will be irreplaceable or difficult to replace will be the creative side of the things, the analytical and problem solving that, hey, we have this new problem to be solved. How do we do it? We have not developed a system like this before, so how do we go about developing it? What components are required and so on. So I think, yes, it has potential, but maybe different impact to different levels of programming and software engineer and different kind of software engineers.
yeah, 100% agree with that. Especially in the sense that, I mean, you can almost, there's Cassie Kozyrkov, the former decision scientist from Google, divided this concept of thinking and thunking, where thinking is where you are being creative, and as Maulik, you called it analyzing, and I call it being creative or being inspired. But those pieces are not AI pieces. And I do think that there is a huge landscape of business opportunity where a recipe and stamping out applications is, there's opportunity, there's a space there for profit, there's a space there to provide value to the world. But the real long-term value is going to come from the innovative side of things. And so I would definitely encourage everyone. I know this question is about how many years, so I'll get back to that. But I would encourage everyone to focus on the creative side of things, and how do you validate what an AI is giving back. The question of, what is the time frame? This is where I go back to the flexibility part. I think it's a good idea for the CEO here to be saying, we need to rethink the role of the software developer. That's exactly what we need to be doing. And that's really why we're talking about it here today. We need to be prepared.
Yeah, I think a big transition is coming, but I have slightly a different thought as well. Uh, there's a lot of talks happening around AI replacing pretty much everything in every industry. So certainly there will be a lot of demand for AI coming in. And again, you need a lot of programmers to build those AI. So I think maybe in short run, there will be a lot of demand coming up for software developers and programmers. Uh, and maybe in 5 years' time, maybe there is a completely different use case or skill set that is required in this industry, and not really like writing lines of code.
Thank you both. We have another question from Federica. What would you recommend for someone who does not know software development but wants to learn solid basics for starting a business? Given now it's possible to code with AI without previous knowledge, do you think it's feasible to gain experience without starting from zero with specific coding language training?
That is such a complicated question to try to answer. I love it. And I might restate it in a couple of different ways, and hopefully I'm answering the right question. Um, if you want to start a business, it sounds like the question is, if you want to start a business that requires building something with software, how can you go about doing this if you don't know how to code? Can you use AI to actually do it? And this goes back a little bit, I think, to what I talked about before. If you look at the power users, the people who use low-code platforms, or if you look at some like Excel, for example, you can do all sorts of amazing things with Excel without actually knowing how to write code, because there are macros, there are pre-built macros, there are add-ons that other people provide. And so you can tie these components together. So you can do that without knowing how to code. You can also find, depending on the nature of the problem you're trying to solve, you might find that that is enough. But if anything goes wrong, or if you want to have long-term defensibility in the thing you're making, where the next person next to you can't make it one day later and copy it and take it away, then you're going to need to invest from that point into something more. So very much around the idea of vetting an idea, making sure there's interest, testing it in the market, getting a reaction of users, getting to the point where you can get a real seed investment. You might be able to get close in some cases with a combination of AI and a low code kind of platform, and someone with experience in those things, but not deep engineering experience. And you might be able to get to the point where then you can prove the idea is worth investing in, which means proving that it's worth investing in a deep engineering team to actually build it out from there.
Yeah. And also, just a general advice as a potential startup founder. As a founder, you don't really need to know every single thing about your startup. You don't need to really learn programming. It's helpful, but it's not always required. And it's about timing. If you're wasting a lot of time in learning programming, and probably you may not be very good compared to someone who has done it for 20, 30 years. As a founder, is it worth your time? Or would it be better for you to actually go out and validating the problem with your customers, trying to win those sales deals, trying to fundraise and rest of the things, right? So I think that's more of a pragmatic decision here, whether as a founder or as a potential founder, would you want to learn programming, or would you want to actually validate the problem with your customer? Where is the trade-off, or which one is more important? And if you get a good co-founder who really understand this technical side, then, and if you both can trust each other, then why not? Why would you want to waste time with that?
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you both. We have one last question from Brian. Other questions have been asked in the direction of replacing programmers. I think that's everyone's fear, right? To that end, what are your thoughts about how layers of engineering integration that require trust, for example, having an AWS account with super admin privilege, can be exposed to AI? Without that, it seems AI is severely limited in interim.
That is such a good point. Very much right now, I always go back to the old George Bush quote, the old American president, trust but verify. And others call it human in the loop. And AI is great for drafts. It's not great for decisions. And as such, if you have a running software, if you're just designing software, AI is great. Give you a draft, trust it, verify it before you actually put it out in production. If AI is actually running in production, you don't want it to be making decisions that are business critical in production. And one of those things would be decisions that might have huge impacts because of the level of privilege that it has, or the level of autonomy it may have to make a decision you don't expect. So always trust but verify, drafts, not decisions. Be very careful when you use AI at runtime.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult question, Brian, to answer. But a lot of hacks or data leak happens due to human error. So would you trust human to be really take care of it? So I think it's not an easy one to answer, in my opinion. But like a lot of organizations, they work on like everything as a code principle, human in the loop, which Michael said. But for some tasks, they don't want human in the loop, and instead everything is done through coding. So I think it's an there is no specific answer whether you should trust AI or not, or you should trust humans or more. Um, I think the space will evolve. I'm pretty sure that some tool will come out and will probably try to better it. And there's always be someone else coming out with some other hack to break it. So we'll see.
Perfect. Thank you both so much for your time today. Thank you everyone for joining. I don't see any other questions unless there's one last minute question from anybody. Doesn't seem like it. Yeah, once again, thank you everyone. The recording will be sent to everyone who registered either later today or tomorrow. And yeah, that's all for today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Maulik. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.